Good morning and welcome to another appointed day of breakthrough. Before the demands of this Thursday pull at your attention, before the tasks and the schedules and the noise of the world close in around you, heaven has already gone ahead of you to deal with something specific. The doors that have been shut, the opportunities that have felt just out of reach, the paths that seem to lead nowhere, no matter how hard you pushed against them. Today is not a day for standing outside locked doors, wondering if they will ever open. Today is a day of breakthrough, a day when what has been closed is commanded to yield, when what has been delayed is released, when the keys that heaven has been holding for you are finally placed in your hand. Somewhere reading this right now, there is a door you have knocked on more times than you can count. A job, a relationship, a business, a dream, and it has not moved. I want you to know that a closed door is not the same as a locked destiny. You were never meant to spend your life standing in hallways, staring at doors that refuse to budge. You were created to walk through open ones, to step into rooms of provision and favor that have already been prepared for you. So wherever you are, driving to work, standing in your kitchen, sitting in the quiet before the day begins, get ready. Because today we are not simply asking for opportunity. We are declaring breakthrough over every closed door, decreeing that what has been shut in the natural is being opened in the supernatural, and calling forth every opportunity that has been assigned to your life, but held back until this appointed moment. Take a deep breath, still your heart, and let's step into this breakthrough together, because the door is opening now. There is a particular kind of despair that settles over a person when a door closes right in front of them, especially when that door seemed to be the only door, the obvious door, the door that made the most sense given everything they had prepared for, worked toward, and believed was theirs to walk through. In that moment, the mind almost automatically leaps to a single conclusion: rejection. It feels personal. It feels final. It feels as though something in us was measured and found wanting, as though the door closed because we were not enough, not qualified enough, not ready enough, not favored enough. This interpretation feels so natural, so immediate, that most people never think to question it. But this interpretation, however understandable, is very often wrong. A closed door is rarely a verdict on our worth. Far more often, it is a redirection, a course correction guided by a wisdom we cannot yet see, steering us away from a path that looked right but was not actually the path assigned to us. This distinction between rejection and redirection changes everything about how we process disappointment. Rejection says something is wrong with you. Redirection says something is being protected for you. Rejection looks backward, cataloging what went wrong, searching for the flaw that caused the closure. Redirection looks forward, trusting that the closure itself is part of a larger design, moving us towards something better suited to our actual assignment. These two interpretations produce entirely different emotional and spiritual postures. A person who believes every closed door is rejection begins to shrink, begins to doubt their own value, begins to approach future opportunities with the bruised caution of someone who has been told no too many times to trust that a yes is still possible. But a person who understands closed doors as redirection carries a very different posture. They grieve the disappointment, certainly, because closed doors still hurt, regardless of how we interpret them. But they do not carry the added weight of believing the closure was a statement about their own inadequacy. Consider how limited our own vision actually is in any given moment. We stand at the threshold of a door, and all we can see is what lies immediately in front of us: the job we wanted, the relationship we hoped for, the opportunity that seemed perfectly suited to our skills and desires. We cannot see what lies beyond that door. We cannot see the obstacles that might have waited for us on the other side, the disappointments that might have unfolded slowly over years, the ways that door, had it opened, might have led us further from our actual purpose rather than closer to it. This is the fundamental limitation of human perspective. We evaluate doors based on how they appear from the outside, based on our immediate desires and current understanding, while the one who sees the entire landscape of our lives evaluates doors based on where they actually lead. A door that looks perfect from where we stand might be a door that dead ends 100 yards past the threshold, invisible to us but fully visible to the one who closed it before we ever had the chance to walk into that dead end. This does not mean every closed door was actively closed by divine intervention in a dramatic, supernatural sense. Sometimes doors close simply because of circumstance, because of timing, because of the ordinary mechanics of a world where not every opportunity we pursue was ever going to work out. But even in these more mundane closures, there is room to trust that redirection is happening rather than assuming rejection has occurred. The outcome is the same regardless of the mechanism. A door that does not open is a door we are not meant to walk through right now. And the appropriate response to that reality is not self-condemnation, but reorientation, a turning of our attention toward whatever door is actually meant to be opened for us. There is a particular kind of grief that comes specifically from mistaking redirection for rejection, because this misinterpretation adds an unnecessary layer of shame on top of ordinary disappointment. Disappointment alone is painful enough. Losing an opportunity we wanted, watching a door close on something we had hoped for, grieving the loss of what might have been. But when disappointment gets combined with the belief that the closure reflects some deficiency in us, the pain compounds. We are no longer simply grieving a lost opportunity. We are now interrogating our own worth, wondering what we lack, wondering why we were passed over, wondering whether we will ever be good enough for the next door to open either. This compounded pain is unnecessary because it is based on a false premise. The door did not close because we were insufficient. The door closed because it was not our door, and mistaking that redirection for a referendum on our value only deepens a wound that redirection was never meant to inflict. It is worth examining why our minds so quickly default to rejection as the explanation for closed doors rather than defaulting to redirection. Part of this tendency comes from how deeply personal our desires feel to us. When we want something badly enough, we invest not just our effort but our identity into the pursuit of it. We begin to believe that our worth is somehow bound up in whether the door opens, so that when it closes, it feels as though our worth has been closed along with it. This fusion of identity and outcome is understandable but ultimately distorted. Our worth was never dependent on any single door opening. Our worth is settled, secure, unchanging, rooted in something far more permanent than whether a particular opportunity materializes on our preferred timeline. When we can separate our sense of worth from the outcome of any specific door, we free ourselves to interpret closed doors more accurately, without the emotional distortion that comes from believing our very identity is on trial every time an opportunity does not pan out. There is also a pattern worth noticing throughout stories of people who experience significant closed doors before eventually walking into their actual assigned path. Almost universally, the closed door that felt devastating in the moment later revealed itself to be protective, redirective, even necessary for the fulfillment of a purpose that could not have been reached by the original path. This pattern is not coincidental. It suggests something structural about how redirection often works, that the door which closes is frequently closing precisely because it stands between us and something better, something we could not yet see, something that required the closure of the first door in order to become possible at all. If every door we wanted had opened exactly when we wanted it to, we might have permanently settled into paths that were never meant to be our final destination, missing entirely the doors that were actually assigned to carry us into our fullest purpose. This reframing requires a certain humility, an acknowledgement that our own assessment of what is best for us is limited and sometimes simply wrong. This is uncomfortable because most of us like to believe we know exactly what we want and exactly why we want it, and we resist the idea that our judgment about a particular opportunity might be mistaken. But redirection asks us to hold our own plans with open hands rather than closed fists, to remain flexible enough to trust that a closed door, however painful, might be steering us toward a better outcome than the one we had mapped out for ourselves. This is not the same as passivity or resignation. It does not mean we stop pursuing opportunities or stop working toward our goals. It means we pursue those goals while remaining humble enough to recognize that not every closed door represents failure, and not every open door we imagine for ourselves is actually the door assigned to us. There is a practical wisdom embedded in learning to release closed doors quickly rather than lingering at them, knocking indefinitely on something that has already been shut. Some people spend years standing at the same closed door, unwilling to accept the closure, convinced that if they simply push hard enough, wait long enough, or prove themselves enough, the door will eventually yield. And while persistence certainly has its place in pursuing genuine assignments, there is a difference between persistent faith towards something that is actually meant to open and stubborn refusal to accept that a particular door has already closed for good reason. Learning to discern between these two postures requires a certain spiritual sensitivity, an ability to recognize when continued effort is aligned with purpose and when continued effort has become resistance against redirection that has already been clearly communicated. This discernment often comes through reflection on the nature of the resistance itself. Some closed doors close temporarily, testing our resolve, requiring persistence to see them eventually open. Other doors close permanently, no matter how much effort or persistence is applied, because they were never meant to open at all. The difference can sometimes be felt in the quality of peace or unrest that accompanies continued pursuit. Persistent effort toward a door that is meant to eventually open tends to be accompanied, even amid the difficulty, by an underlying sense of rightness, a settled conviction that this is still the correct direction despite the obstacles. But continued effort toward a door that has permanently closed tends to produce a different quality of struggle. Exhaustion without progress, striving without peace, a sense of forcing something that refuses to align no matter how much energy is poured into it. Learning to notice this difference helps prevent the exhausting cycle of endlessly pursuing doors that redirection has already closed for good reason. Releasing a closed door does not mean pretending the disappointment does not exist or rushing past the grief that naturally accompanies unmet hopes. Grief over a closed door is legitimate, even when we trust that the closure is redirection rather than rejection. We can hold both truths simultaneously: genuine sorrow over what did not happen, combined with genuine trust that something better is being prepared. This is not contradictory. It is simply honest, because redirection does not erase the real loss involved in a door closing, even when that closure ultimately serves a good purpose. Allowing ourselves to grieve while still trusting the redirection keeps us emotionally honest without collapsing into either denial of the pain or despair over the closure. There is also something important to consider about how closed doors often serve to clarify rather than merely to disappoint. When a door we wanted closes, it forces a kind of reevaluation that would not have happened had the door simply opened as expected. This reevaluation, uncomfortable as it is, often produces clarity about what we actually want, what we are actually suited for, what direction actually aligns with our deeper purpose, rather than simply our surface level desire. Closed doors have a way of stripping away options that were never truly aligned with our path, narrowing our focus until what remains is more accurately targeted toward where we are actually meant to go. This clarifying function of closed doors is easy to miss in the immediate aftermath of disappointment, but it becomes visible in retrospect. When we can look back and see how the closure actually sharpened our direction rather than simply obstructing it. Understanding closed doors as redirection rather than rejection ultimately changes the entire trajectory of how we move through disappointment. Instead of interpreting every closed door as evidence of our own inadequacy, we begin to interpret closed doors as information, as guidance, as a form of communication from a wisdom greater than our own limited perspective. This does not remove the sting of disappointment, but it removes the additional burden of shame that so often accompanies closed doors when we misread them as personal rejection. It allows us to grieve honestly while still moving forward with confidence, trusting that redirection, however painful in the moment, is ultimately protective, purposeful, and aimed at leading us toward doors that are actually meant for us, rather than doors that merely looked appealing from where we happen to be standing. There is a particular frustration that comes from standing before a door that will not open, holding nothing in your hands, feeling as though the very thing that would grant you entry has been withheld from you along with the entry itself. This is often how delay feels, not simply as a waiting period, but as an absence, a void, a stretch of time in which nothing seems to be happening, nothing seems to be provided, nothing seems to be preparing you for the moment the door finally gives way. But this perception, however natural, misses something essential about how delay actually functions. Delay is rarely empty. Far more often, delay is the very process by which the key required to open the door is being forged, shaped, and placed into your hand, even when you cannot yet see or feel it happening. The wait is not separate from the key. The wait is often the workshop in which the key itself is being made. This reframing matters enormously because most people experience delay as pure loss. Lost time, lost opportunity, lost momentum, lost years that feel as though they have contributed nothing to the eventual outcome. But if delay is understood instead as the process of key making, then the waiting period is transformed from a season of loss into a season of preparation. However invisible that preparation might feel while it is happening, this does not make the delay comfortable. Waiting is still waiting, and waiting is rarely pleasant regardless of how meaningful we understand it to be. But there is a profound difference between waiting with the belief that nothing is happening and waiting with the belief that something essential is being formed, even in the dark, even without visible evidence. Even when every external sign suggests that the delay is simply an obstacle rather than an instrument, consider what a key actually is and what it is designed to do. A key is not a generic object that opens every door indiscriminately. A key is specific, shaped precisely to match the particular mechanism of the particular door it is meant to open. This specificity is important because it suggests that the preparation happening during delay is not generic either. It is not simply time passing until some arbitrary threshold is reached. It is specific formation, precise shaping, a process calibrated exactly to the door that delay is preparing you to walk through. This means that the character built during a season of delay, the skills developed, the relationships formed, the wisdom gained through difficulty, the patience cultivated through waiting itself, are not incidental byproducts of a wasted season. They are the very shape of the key being cut. Each experience another groove carved into the metal, each trial another notch filed into place until the key that emerges fits the lock it was always intended for. This is why so many people who eventually walk through significant doors of breakthrough can look back on their season of delay and identify specific things they gained during that waiting period that became essential once the door finally opened. The delay was never wasted time running parallel to their real story. The delay was part of their real story, contributing directly to their readiness for what came next. Had the door opened earlier, before the key was fully formed, they might have walked through it unprepared, unable to sustain what was on the other side, unable to steward the opportunity in a way that would have allowed it to flourish rather than collapse under the weight of insufficient preparation. This possibility deserves serious consideration because it reframes premature openings not as blessings we missed out on, but as potential disasters we were spared from walking into unprepared. There is a sobering truth embedded in this idea that not every door we want opened immediately would actually have served us well if it had opened on our preferred timeline. We tend to assume that faster is always better, that the sooner a door opens, the more blessed the outcome. But this assumption does not account for the reality that some doors require a level of readiness that simply cannot be rushed, a maturity that can only be developed through time, through trial, through the specific kind of formation that only delay seems capable of producing. A door opened too early before the key has been fully shaped often leads to struggle on the other side, to an opportunity squandered not because the opportunity itself was flawed, but because the person walking through it had not yet developed what was necessary to sustain it. This is why delay, however painful, often serves a protective function even when it feels purely punitive in the moment. This raises an important question about how to actually recognize the key being formed during a season of delay. Because if the key is being shaped invisibly, how can a person waiting in the dark begin to identify what is actually happening rather than simply enduring what feels like empty time? Part of the answer lies in paying attention to the specific lessons, skills, and character qualities that difficulty tends to produce, even when we did not choose the difficulty and would not have chosen it if given the option. Patience is rarely developed in seasons of ease. Resilience is rarely built in circumstances that require nothing of us. Wisdom about how to navigate obstacles is rarely gained by people who have never actually faced any. If we examine our seasons of delay honestly, we often find that specific qualities were being developed in us during that very time, qualities that would not have emerged had the delay not forced their formation. These qualities are the key, even when they do not feel like a key while they are being built. There is also a relational dimension to the key that is often formed during delay, because seasons of waiting frequently connect us to people, communities, and networks that would not have crossed our path had the door opened immediately as we originally wanted. Sometimes the key required to open a door is not primarily a skill or a character quality, but a relationship, a connection, an alliance that could only have been formed during the very delay that felt so frustrating at the time. Looking back, many people can identify specific individuals who entered their life during a season of waiting, individuals who later became instrumental in the eventual opening of the door they had been standing before all along. Had the delay not occurred, had the door opened immediately, these relationships might never have formed, and the key they represented would never have been available when the door finally required it. This suggests that delay is not simply a private internal process of personal formation, but often a relational and circumstantial orchestration as well, weaving together people, timing, and events that must align in ways far more complex than we can typically perceive from the inside of our own waiting. We tend to think of delay as primarily about us, about our own readiness, our own growth, our own preparation. But delay often involves the preparation of factors entirely outside our control as well. The readiness of other people, the alignment of circumstances, the timing of events that have nothing directly to do with us, but that must nonetheless fall into place before the door we are waiting for can actually open in a way that will hold. This broader orchestration is invisible to us precisely because it involves elements beyond our own experience, but its invisibility does not mean it is not happening. It simply means we are not positioned to see the full scope of what is being arranged during the time we experience as delay. Understanding this should produce a certain humility about our own impatience. A recognition that our frustration with delay often stems from an assumption that we are the only variable that matters, that if we are ready, the door should open, without accounting for the reality that many other variables, entirely outside our awareness, must also align before the door can open in a sustainable way. This does not mean our own readiness is irrelevant. It clearly matters. And the formation of our own character and skill during delay is a real and necessary part of the process. But it does mean that delay is not solely a referendum on whether we personally have done enough to deserve the door opening. Sometimes we are ready, and the door still has not opened because other elements of the orchestration have not yet fallen into place. This is not evidence that our preparation was wasted. It is evidence that the process at work is larger and more intricate than our own individual timeline. There is a temptation during long seasons of delay to interpret the length of the waiting as evidence that no key is actually being formed, that the delay has simply become permanent, that the door in question has been quietly removed from the realm of possibility altogether. This temptation grows stronger the longer the delay persists, because human patience has limits, and the human mind tends to interpret prolonged absence of evidence as evidence of absence itself.